Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you all today. So, we are coming to another Naturia deck. It was actually one I meant to come to a little bit sooner than now, but I got a little bit caught up in a certain deck that uses Pumpkin Sprite monsters that I've talked at great length about now, and we'll definitely be covering later. So, rather than talk about it more, let's talk about more the deck in front of us, which I've finally gotten to, and that's going to be Naturia Runick. It's definitely been a minute since I've featured any Runick variants here on the channel. Yeah, it's honestly been a while, mostly because of the Shizu Shufflers. Those are, of course, going to be very detrimental to Runick's game plan, as if you try to put stuff back with Fountain, and then your opponent uses either Mudora or... I always forget which one, Keldo, to shuffle your spell cards back, well then you don't get to draw because they were put back by a different effect and not by the Runick Fountain. So, in that regard, Runick is not super great in this meta, and it's not going to be as strong as it is right in the TCG until probably these cards get limited. But in the meantime, Naturia Runick is definitely still a fine variant. Just because the shufflers are a factor doesn't mean that it's impossible to get wins with this deck. It does make the meta a little bit unfavored for it, but it's still a great variant overall. So, what does the Naturia Runick variant do that others don't? Well, there's a couple of different things. One of the main things is access to a synchro engine. We have played synchro variants of Runick before here on the channel, but we're mostly just using like generic level 2 tuners. I think at one point we're even using like Instant Fusion with Alvain, the Essence of Vanity, but here we are instead using the Naturia cards. Of course, Camellia and Mole Cricket make for a very powerful engine when used in conjunction with Blessing and Sacred Tree. And for good measure, we're also playing a singular copy of the Naturia Sunflower as well. That's to get monster negates, particularly in conjunction with the Camellia. You can potentially negate multiple monster effects per turn and destroy those monsters as well with the Sunflower. So that's going to be a nice control option to an already very control-focused deck. As you can see, a lot of our extra deck, including our synchro plays, are very control-focused in mind as well. We're, of course, playing Beast and Barkion because we have, well, you know, an Naturia engine. We've also got a couple of level 6s, Coral Dragon and the Stardust Charge Warrior. These are going to be mainly used with Camellia and the Hugin, the Runick Wings. And then which level 6 you go for depends on how you want to then extend into a level 10. You can either use Naturia Blessing to bring back Camellia, in which case you want to go for a Stardust Charge Warrior, as this one is not a tuner, or you can use one of your Runick spells in order to go for a Geri, the Runick Fangs, which is not a tuner, so you'd want to use the level 6 tuner, Coral Dragon. Either way, you get to not only draw a card, but also then go into a level 10 synchro monster. Turn 1 is usually going to be Baronne de Fleur, but sometimes it could be Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign, Chengying if you're going second, or as a follow-up play as well. So there's a couple of different options here. We also have a Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. I know that a lot of people are, and you know, I definitely took a look at it as well. A lot of people seem to be basing their builds off of Pack's build that did pretty well. But the one thing that I noticed that a lot of people were just kind of jamming the Red Dragon Archfiend Scarlight, and I don't think it's as good as Draco Berserker in this meta. The Draco Berserker battle effect does come up occasionally, but we're mostly looking for the banishing effect. So this can be very good against the tier limit monsters, as it can banish them, but it doesn't negate, but particularly banishing a Fuser in the graveyard while it's activating is, as we all know, pretty much a negate. So and being able to just banish stuff, like even if we don't negate something like Kaleidoheart or Rokalos, we can just banish it and just not have to worry about it for the rest of the duel as well. So there's definitely some potential there. You don't go into level 8 that often in this deck, honestly. It's usually just 6 and then directly into 10, but it can come up sometimes. After that, we just have a few rank 4s here, just some generic options, and we also have Dawn or Dagger for Hire as a generic link to our removal option as well. I mean, otherwise, the deck is pretty self-explanatory. We are running a small Ishizu package here. These are mainly here to act as disruption, as well as additional level 4 bodies. I've got 2 of each Keldo and Mudora, and then I'm also running 2 Kelbek as well. A lot of people were, and I was initially as well, just running the 2 Keldo and 3 Mudora, and that's it. But I wanted to try out the Kelbek as a potential disruption option, as, you know, we don't really have a whole lot going second here. You know what, I actually just realized we're not even playing Max C, which I definitely meant to include in the deck, but, you know, that's fine too. We did see a small amount of success without the Max C. That's the thing though, like, even if I were to take out Kelbek's another card for Max C's, like, I mean, I guess to be fair, it's just to discourage our opponents, mostly when going second, because going first, Imperm is really our only, like, you know, notable disruption that we have. So our opponent is you know, able to otherwise just continue on with their plays. I don't know, it's interesting. You can make an argument either for or against Maxi. I mean, it should probably just be in here. I definitely did forget it. I definitely did mean to include it, but at the same time, there's still merit to all the other options we have here as well. Like, I do feel like we need at least 14 Runick spells, and for that reason I have one of each: Smiting, Storm, Golden Droplet, and Dispelling. You can probably get away without the Golden Droplet and then only be playing 13 Runick spells, aside from Fountain, of course, but honestly, in playing this on ladder, I can tell you I wish I still had more Runick spells in this deck. Like, you know, we have the 14, and we already have to make some kind of question. Like, I don't really like playing Golden Droplet, but I think it's more important to have a decent variety of Runick names. Moving forward, I'd honestly like to include a second Smiting Storm just to bring it up to 15, or possibly a second Dispelling as well. I just don't like the random discarding in Tier Limits format, because it's really easy to just end up discarding like an Agido or a Kelbek or a Tier Limit name. That is another problem with playing this deck in the Tier Limit meta. It's kind of a, you know, reason why we're in a tier 0 meta, like one of many reasons honestly, but one of the reasons is that if you're not playing tier limits right now, the tier limits have no problem activating the millers, and that gives them so much more gas. Like, maybe it's just me being used to playing the tier limit mirror match where the millers aren't really much of a factor and the game gets a bit more grindy as a result, but when you're playing against tier limits and they can just activate Agido and Kelbek to send the top 5 and not have to worry about it at all, things become a lot more dicey. They just get so much more gas, and it becomes much more difficult for you know, the opponent to beat them, or for us to beat them, which, you know, again, is part of the reason why this is such a tier 0 meta, but I digress. So let's go ahead and break the list down card by card, as we always do, and then we'll look at some gameplay. So we're on 3 Naturia Mole Cricket, 1 Naturia Sunflower, 2 Keldo the Sacred Protector, 2 Mudora the Sword Oracle, 2 Kelbek the Ancient Vanguard, 3 Naturia Camellia, 2 Runick Fountain, 2 Call by the Grave, 2 Runick Tip, 3 Runick Flashing Fire, 2 Runick Destruction, 2 Runick Freezing Curses, 2 Runick Slumber, 1 Runick Smiting Storm, 1 Runick Golden Droplet, 1 Runick Dispelling, 3 Naturia Blessing, 3 Infinite Impermanence, and then 3 Naturia Sacred Tree. That's going to go ahead and do it for our main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 2 Hugin the Runick Wings, 2 Geri the Runick Fangs, 1 Naturia Beast, 1 Naturia Barkion, 1 Stardust Charge Warrior, 1 Coral Dragon, 1 Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, 1 Baronne de Fleur, 1 Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Chengying, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 number 41 Bagooska, the terribly tired Tapir, 1 number 60 Dugaris the Timeless, and then 1 Donner Dagger for Hire. So that's going to go ahead and do it for the list. Now let's look at these games. Alright, so our first duel here is going to be up against Tier Limits, and our opponent is running a slightly irregular list, but it's actually worse for us because they're playing a couple of Herald of Green Light in the main deck, which, not a very common main deck choice, but, you know, against us that actually is a bit of an, like it's going to be a little bit dicey. So, what else is dicey is going second in the opponent's opening with the Perlerino. That's definitely not something you ever want to see, so looks like they're going to normal summon Rhino Heart, pitch to Havness to fuse with a Shyren in hand. Don't really know why you wouldn't fuse with the Rhino Heart on field in this case, unless you were... Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really... Especially because, yeah, they just search on their Shyren again. I don't know. Like, I guess they're trying to make a rank 4 as well. It's just a bit win more. I don't know. It's definitely a play I've made in the past, but as I've played more with and against Tier Limits, I feel like going for a rank 4 in turn 1, assuming it's the mirror... I don't know. It's kind of dicey. But at the same time, so assuming it's not the mirror, which my opponent did when they activated Kelbek here, and it's a little frustrating they actually got rewarded for it. I mean, we did at least hit some shufflers here, but at the same time, yeah, it's just, it's frustrating when your opponent is like, you know they don't know what you're playing against, unless they, you know, we did end up revealing some information, but I don't think we did. But they still just go ahead and fire off the Miller anyway. And honestly, even after the Miller, they didn't end up on that great of a board. Like the Elf and Shyren here doesn't really do a whole lot. They do get to bring back Merly, but yeah, I mean, they didn't go for Rolkalos or anything, so that's pretty good for us at least. I'm going to chain this Dispelling to the Max C just to get the Hugin off. That way you get the Runick Fountain. And we also get to discard the Naturia Sacred Tree. Most Naturia variants, you never want Sacred Tree in hand, but with Runick it's actually fine because we can just use Hugin to discard it. And then we get a double search, which is nice. So Gonna start with the Runick Fountain. Opponent's got a Sprite Elf, but I have the Called by here. Opponent is going to, of course, just chain the Keldo, though. So, ultimately going to have to let this get revived and hope they don't mill anything. Still wanted to force the Shuffler, though, so that way it's one less we'd have to deal with. Sometimes it is just how you have to handle the tier limit matchup, right? You just have to kind of, like, you know, you just have to make sure that you're fighting through all the shufflers so that you can at some point get draws. Also, wait, I'm confused. Did my opponent not shuffle back? Oh, they did shuffle back them early, but then, of course, they don't get it back to the field. Duh, of course. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to try to shuffle back for one here. Opponent's got a Mudora, but we're going to take a look at their graveyard again. I think that was their last shuffler. Yeah, so they don't have no more shufflers. That's good news for me moving forward. Gonna normal summon the Mole Cricket and then set to. Not gonna activate Mole Cricket just yet because, of course, we're under max C, and we can just do it during our opponent's turn. It's not gonna be that big of a deal. So, looks like our opponent's gonna start off with the Sprite Elf. I'll just go ahead and chain the Mole Cricket in response. That way I can get the Sunflower and the Camellia in play before my opponent starts committing a lot to the board. We also get to proc both Camellia effects here to not only, of course, send the Sacred Tree, but also special summon the Mole Cricket back from our graveyard. Sacred Tree is going to add us our third blessing because we actually already had the other two. Opponent's then going to normal summon Herald of Orange Light and link off for the Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. It's a little annoying, but it's actually completely fine. I think I'd rather deal with this one huge monster than like a massive, you know, sprawling board on my opponent's part. Plus, we have 3 blessings, so the graveyard negation effect isn't going to be particularly relevant here. I'm going to have no problem going into a level 10 synchro, and then on top of that, at the very least, a rank 4, if not more than that. We also get to draw a fountain. It's just another fountain, though, so it's not going to end up coming up here. Gonna activate this first blessing to force out my opponent's Underworld Goddess's effect, and of course I have the other 2 face down as well, so I'll just flip up another one, go for Camellia. Camellia's effect to send a Mole Cricket, because I think I'm actually out of Sacred Trees at this point. Yes, we've actually already banned all 3 of our Sacred Trees, which is good. You want that to happen. So we actually get to go for Beast, and then because our opponent still has a monster with the highest attack, we get 2 Camellias back from our graveyard. So now we get to go for Baronne, and then we still have the normal summon for this Keldo as well. So Baronne gets to destroy the Underworld Goddess, then Camellia and Keldo are going to sync off for the Draco Berserker. We don't have a battle phase, so it's not lethal this turn, but, you know, our opponent's in top deck mode. We have an infinite spell negates, an Omni negate, and we get to banish monster effects that activate, which is pretty much a negate against fusers. So, yeah, my opponent's just going to go ahead and concede, and indeed, I don't really see too much of a way for my opponents to come back here. So, there's our first game there against the Tier Laments. Let's go ahead and take a look at another duel. And this time we're going to be up against Stun. It's just good old-fashioned Fossil Dyna and Spectre Border, Thunder King Ryo, and Floodgate Stun. I say good old, but I mean, you know, it's funny. Like, as much as I like to rip on Stun now, I played it for a long time. People who you know, I played with in TCG can attest that I did often turn to decks like that when playing. Honestly, it was mostly just for budget reasons, but I don't know. I defended them at the time, but I don't know. I don't think there's anything, like, here's the thing. I don't like playing against Stun, but at the same time, like, I don't like to give people shit for playing Stun, because, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, it's all you have. It's like, I would always feel bad when people would give me shit for playing Stun decks and I couldn't, like, afford to play anything else in the meta. And it's like, I'm just like, listen, I want to play some amount of Yu-Gi-Oh, okay? Like, I just want to, like, go to locals and regionals. I don't know. But in any case, yeah, this is going to be a very low impact turn 1 board. It's just going to be Fountain, Baron, and Imperm. We do have a Kelbek and a Dispelling, though, so we've got some options. My opponent's going to Prosperity, so I'm cool using Dispelling here because, or not Prosperity, Extravagance, because if they extrav, you know, especially for 6, like, they're obviously not going to be on tier limits. So here I'll use the Dispelling to make them discard a random card. We nabbed a Solemn Judgment. It's also going to allow me to draw 2 off of the Runick Fountain here. So opponent's got a Fossil Dyna, 3 back rows before passing back over. Gonna draw for a turn and then fire off my Baron's effect, see if I can snipe a back row. My opponent does have a Solemn Strike, so that's gonna stop me from doing that. with the Baron, but I still have plenty of other options in hand here, especially given that I have an Imperm face down as well. Going to use Destruction to hit one more back row just in case I happen to be able to hit like a Solemn Judgment. Also going to Fountain for another draw. Now flip up Imperm to negate my opponent's Fossil. I thankfully they didn't have another Solemn down, Solemn Judgment that is, to stop that. So we get to go ahead and make some plays. I even get to mill with Keldo, or Kelbek rather, because I know we're not in a tier limit matchup here. And it's not too often I would use the Kelbek mill effect, even if I wasn't against tier, but given that I'm up against stun, I know there's no benefit at all to them for milling. The last back row actually did end up being Solemn Judgment, which is a little surprising. I really thought they would have used it on the Imperm, but they end up saving it for this Coral Dragon here. Now, I make the classic misplay of playing Naturia Blessing in my own Imperm column. So, you know, it happens to everybody. Like, that's another thing, too, that, like, you know, I used to feel bad about when playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Was, like, making misplays like that. Like, you know, just beating myself up and being like, oh, I should really know better than to do stuff like that. And I've even seen people like just quit after they have that happen, right? But you know, honestly, I don't think it's anything worth losing your mind over. Minor misplays like that are going to happen to literally everybody, like I said. So aside from that, we're also very close to decking our opponent out anyway. They very much aided in that effort when they activated Desires, which I don't know. Maybe it was still right for them to activate Desires. I guess it didn't look like I had too much, but at the same time, it's like, if you're up against Runick and you're on a stun deck, you have to know that, like, your best option to be is to be on the grind game and try to grind me out. Whereas, you know, again, with the Desires banishing their top 10, again, I think after I already started playing Runick cards, I just kind of ended up speeding up my own win condition. So there we go. We still have a couple more duels to check out. Let's go ahead and go straight into the next one here. We have another game against tier limits here. This might be the longest game, at least in terms of like turn count, that I've had against tier limits ever. Like even, I don't think I've had a mirror match that's gone on this long. So we can take the first turn here. Our opening hand's looking, it's all right. I mean, we've got some Runick stuff. We have a Camellia, so can't complain about that. I mean, really, a Runick spell and Camellia is like the bare minimum you need to make plays. And by make plays, I mean summon like one level 10 synchro. So opponent is going to fire off their Havness. That's definitely not going to look too good for me. Although when we look at their mills, yeah, it's not bad at all. They did put a Cyber Sign in the yard that is worth noting, but aside from that, nothing scary at all. Gonna use the Camellia to bin the Sacred Tree. Then we're gonna sync off for our Coral Dragon here because I'm not going to use Naturia Blessing. I have another Runick spell in hand, so I'm going to use that instead. That way we get to draw 2 with our Runick Fountain, and then in addition to that, still make a level 10 Synchro monster, our Baronne de Fleur. And as you can see, we somehow managed to end up with all 3 of our Infinite Impermanences in our opening hand. So I'll just set all of them and a Blessing, and then pass back over to my opponent. Gonna flip up Blessing during the draw phase to get out the Camellia. Camellia's effect will then send a Mole Cricket. I just want Camellia on the board as soon as possible. That way when my opponent summons from the extra deck, I get to do the Mole Cricket and then go straight to a Sunflower, even if I still have the monster with the highest attack because I have a Baron. I decided to take a chance here and see, or not take a chance, rather. I decided to negate and destroy the Baron, even though it would trigger the Shiren. That looks a little bit weird, but the reason I did that is I didn't want my opponent to mill 6 between the 3 off Shiren and the 3 off Scream. I figured it was pretty likely they were going to get to summon a tier 1 monster anyway, and I figured, you know, if they're going to go for Kiklos, I might as well let them go for Kiklos and not have them mill 6. So, to be fair, they're going to mill the other 3 later, like right now, but at the very least, we get to just go ahead and imperm the Kiklos. We also get to special the Mole Cricket because our opponent summoned from the extra deck. Although, to be fair, we could have used Camellia's effect. Actually, I shouldn't have activated Camellia's effect. I did both just in case my opponent negated the Camellia effect, but they weren't very likely to do that at all now that I think about it. Yeah, there was no reason for me to activate both. Like, I could have potentially used Camellia's effect later in the turn, but in any case, I'm just going to use my other Imperm here on this Merly, also triggering the Mole Cricket to summon the Sunflower, using Camellia's effect to mill my top 2 to do so. Opponent is just going to end up battling over the Sunflower as well as my Camellia here, so that's not going to ultimately make too high of an impact on the support state. Looking back here, I definitely could have played this turn better. I think my opponent could have too, though. Like, I think it's a little... I mean, I guess this Sprite Elf... Oh, here was my major misplay. Yeah, so my opponent used Sprite Elf to bring back Stein and then go for X-Trio. And you might be thinking, Hex, why didn't you use Imperm there? It was honestly just a misclick. I don't know, my brain just assumed, I guess my opponent was going to, you know, correctly use Sprite Elf to prevent the Stein from getting targeted. So when I got the prompt for Imperm, I skipped right past it. And it was only after I skipped it that it clicked that, like, wait, my opponent's Stein actually isn't under the Sprite Elf. I totally could have negated it here, but yeah, just ultimately ended up misplaying and unfortunately allowed them to summon an X-Trio as a result, which against this deck is, you know, a huge deal. So, like I said, the rest of this duel is pretty long, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw this and fast forward, honestly, as we have a total of 12 turns to cover here. So, here I do get to, basically my goal right now is to just clear the X-Trio off the board. I'm going to use the Baronne effect to get rid of the Sprite Elf, and then I get to go for the Donner Dagger for hire and use that to answer the X-Trio. Since my opponent already triggered Scream this turn, I'll use the Runick Destruction on the Scream. That will allow me to trigger the Fountain. I know my opponent's got Shufflers, but like I mentioned before, I want to force my opponent to use all of their Shufflers, so that way, you know, again, we're looking at the grind game here, right? I want to be able to use Fountain later, so I'm just going to make them use the Shufflers now, because they're going to have to use them at some point anyway, right? So, of course, our opponent does have quite a few of those Shufflers in the graveyard. They have 2 Mudoras and a Keldo in there right now, and they've already used, well, now they've used 1 Mudora and 1 Keldo, and they have 1 of each still in their graveyard. So, 2 of the 5 Shufflers are down, and believe it or not, our opponent is going to end up going through literally all 5 of their Shufflers. One of the main things that's going to allow me to hold out for so long here, honestly, is just my Baron's 3,000 attack points. If you can summon something, like if your deck can put out like a body that's 3,000 or higher, I've noticed there are times where Tyr just like, honestly has a difficult time answering that. It might even be worth noting, like as far as like the new Blackwings go, right? Because they have that full Armor Master that's 3,000 attack. Although to be fair, you know, there is Dweller and the Field Spell, so you would have to answer both of those first, but I can only assume that defense mode turn there was just a misclick, rather. I mean, yeah, they get to mill a bunch of stuff here, but at the same time, like, they're not doing too much. Like, interesting that they collided hard in my Fountain and not my Baron, actually. I didn't even register that until... Because I think this is one of those games where I was like very much half paying attention at this point just because I assumed I was going to lose. But then I kind of realized when they didn't, you know, when my Baron was still on the field and you know, my opponent's Kaleidoheart is just staring it down, I'm like, wait a second, they might not actually have an out to this. Hold on. They're going to battle over my Mole Cricket, but I mean, that's not really going to like win them the duel here. Oh yeah, I finally get to use Flashing Fire to blow up this Redoer. My opponent's deck is also looking pretty low as well. They're down to 3 cards now. Smiting Storm would do it here. Well, they're at 4 now, but I mean, Destruction would do it here. Slumber, if they're at 3, would do it. Unfortunately, no Runick spells. We do get another Naturia Mole Cricket though, so we can go ahead and use that to get a Camellia and a Sunflower and establish, you know, this little bit of a lock. Although our opponent does, of course, use the Soleil to just go ahead and negate the Sunflower. I am going to still use my Camellia to mill to you, just to see if I can get to a Runick spell a little bit more quickly. We end up milling a Fountain and a Slumber here. So I think if I would have left it alone, Slumber would have been my next draw, but at the same time, my opponent probably won't have 3 cards in their deck, and if they're at 2 or less, I can't use Slumber to mill them, so... like I said, really looking for Smiting Storm here, honestly. As my opponent continues to put bodies on the board, I'm going to desperately try to do the same, just keeping up a wall of defense along with my 8,000 life points, just to stall and hold out, hope that I can get a Runick spell that can finish my opponent off. They have just 1 card left though, so
it would have to be exactly Smiting Storm, which is already in the graveyard. So then my opponent, then they connect failed. Then they connect failed. I thought they timed out at first, honestly, but it ended up being a connection failure. So yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I kind of advocate not scooping, is because disconnects can happen. I've played enough, not just Master Duel, but other digital card games like Runeterra and Hearthstone to know that, you know, it does not happen very often, but very occasionally your opponent will have a certain victory and then they'll just disconnect. So there's that duel. We have one more to take a look at real quick. It's going to be a fast one, so we'll take a look at that and then end off the video. And this last game is actually going to be a mirror match. I haven't encountered too many Naturia Runicks on ladder, honestly. It's been probably a literal handful. Like, I think it's been 5 or less that I've seen, even since the Naturia cards dropped. But we do encounter one here again in a mirror match, and we have a phenomenal going first hand. We have Mole Cricket and just literal endless Runick spells, which is just about the most you could really ask for in this deck, honestly, for your opening turn 1 hand. Alright, so when we banish our opponent's top 3 with that Slumber, we do end up seeing that they are going to be the mirror match. This is very valuable information, as normally I would go for a Baronne de Fleur, right? And just go for level 10 Omni Negate. But here, because I know I'm up against a Runick specifically, I'm just going to go for Naturia Beast. That's one of the nice things when you are playing Runick, is that you can sometimes sneak in a mill like that and then get some valuable information about what your opponent's playing as a result. So yeah, between the Beast and the Imperm, I'm feeling pretty good here. I've got the Mole Cricket, of course, as well. But my opponent's actually on Kaijus, and they got a Gamma Seal, so definitely not super great for me. But fortunately for me, my opponent actually screwed up big time here. They did this in the wrong order. They didn't, well, not even necessarily the wrong order per se, but they shouldn't have chained the Runick Destruction to the Flashing Fire here. What they wanted to do was use Flashing Fire to get rid of my Hugin, then use Destruction to get rid of my Fountain. That way I wouldn't be able to use the Runick spells in my hand, and then I wouldn't have plays. But because they chained the Destruction specifically to the Flashing Fire, because it's on the same chain link, my Hugin is still in the field, and I still get to just use the effect, as you can see here. So ultimately did not end up doing what my opponent wanted to here. Honestly, even if they had gotten to blow up the Runick Fountain, I do still have the Imperm, so if their plan was to go for Hugin to try to establish the Fountain, they would still be cut off by that means. I don't ultimately end up getting to know if that's the case, though, because my opponent is going to just immediately concede out of shame. Or maybe just the rest of their hand was just completely, you know, not good going into this kind of a board state. I don't know. It just seemed like more of a shady concede, though. So that is a quick one. But I just thought it was a little funny game, so I thought I'd throw it in here at the end. So that's going to go ahead and do it for our games here with Naturia Runick. Thank you for watching. Let's go ahead and move now to our outro.
Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation. You do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon.
But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now, so without further ado, this is Hexlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.